State your premise,
Like
Zeref.
basically, I'm not convinced that a God exists.
Okay. My premise is that God is the uncaused cause for the universe. And
Isn't
yeah,
that
he's the
isn't
only
that your
cause for the universe.
conclusion?
What?
Isn't that your conclusion?
No, that's my premise.
Okay, what's your conclusion?
Why can't I say my conclusion when my conclusion comes?
Well, I just want to know what your conclusion is.
Well, my conclusion will either be the same as my premise
So
or,
wait, hold on.
uh,
If your conclusion is the exact same thing as your premise, that's just a circular argument.
no, no, I'm saying
That's
my
by
conclusion
definition.
will either be,
That's
I
by
said my
definition.
conclusion will either be the same as my premise
Mm-hmm.
or something similar.
Oh yeah, if it's the same as your premise, that's a circular argument by definition, including your conclusion within your premises. That's by definition a circular argument.
So I guess you know what? Since I don't know what my conclusion is gonna be, I'm just gonna wait till we go on with the debate, and then I'll form a
Okay, sure.
conclusion while we start. All right,
You
yeah.
can give your argument now. I just wanted to get that out of the way.
All right. So my my definition of God would be that God is the uncaused cause in the universe.
Uncaused cause of the universe. Okay, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah.
How did you come to that conclusion?
Okay. I came to that conclusion because I think that everything that began to exist must have a cause, right?
Yeah. How do you know that?
How do I know that? Well, because I exist, right?
Yes, you exist.
Okay, so why can't one of my causes be to debate you,
What?
or one of my causes just be to what is it called? Exist. Why can't that be one of my causes?
Your premise was everything that begins to exist has a cause. What if I tell you something like a brute contingency? How do you explain that?
Alright, so that well then everything well contingency itself is just everything that everything has a cause. That's what contingency is. That's what the argument for contingency is.
That's not contingency. That's the
Okay, so
principle.
then what's contingency?
That's the principle of sufficient reasoning. A contingent fact is something that could have not been.
What do you mean by that? By could have
A
not been.
contingent fact is something that is possible but not necessary, right? So it is contingent that I'm on a PC right now. I could be on my phone, right? That fact is contingent. And what a brute contingency is a fact that could have been different that has no explanation. So if brute contingencies exist, then your affirmation is necessarily false. So that means brute
What?
contingencies must not exist. How can you justify that brute contingencies do not exist?
So then what you're saying is that basically a contingent fact is just a possible actuality. That basically
Not
that
a
yes you are
possible
on your.
actuality. It doesn't need to be actual. It's just something that's possible, right? So something that
So
could
then, yeah,
possibly
okay.
be
So then,
different.
so then in the case of God, you're just saying that okay, when you're using the contingent or the argument from contingency, God would just be a possible
No,
cause for the universe. Is what
that's
you're
not what I'm
saying.
saying. I'm saying that you made a claim, and that claim was everything that begins to exist has a cause. The
Yeah.
idea of brute contingencies is a direct contradiction to that claim. And so, if you affirm that claim to be true, you are also affirming the existence of brute contingencies to be false. What argument can you give me demonstrating the falsity or the impossibility of a brute contingency?
Before I give you an argument again, just so I have a clear understanding, can you re-explain what a brute contingency fact is?
So, a contingent fact is something that could be different, right? The color
Mhm.
shoes I'm wearing, that could be different. How tall I am, that could be different. Me being born, that could be different. I could have never been born. I am a contingent fact. A brute contingent fact is the same thing but does not have an explanation. Just exists brutally without explanation, or without cause.
So it'd be it'd be like my original premise: God is the uncaused cause, or would it just have a cause with just no explanation behind it?
It's not only saying that, it's saying that there are things that can exist that violate your affirmation. And your affirmation is everything that begins to exist. God doesn't begin to exist, so God wouldn't be a brute contingency. God is a necessity by definition. He's eternal. But a brute
Well, yeah.
contingency is something that would begin to exist or could not exist and still have no
So then he
explanation. So how can
So then
you
what you're saying is the correct premise for my argument, or one of the correct premises for my argument, if I was using a brute contingent fact, would be God is a necessary being or
No,
a
what I'm
necessary
saying
cause.
here is that you have a claim, and that claim is everything that begins to exist as a cause. If brute contingencies exist, that falsifies the claim. So in order to justify your claim, you must demonstrate it is impossible for brute contingencies to exist. Can you do this?
Sure.
What did he
Give me
say?
a second here. I said sure. Give me a second here.
Okay. I'll write out the argument that I'm using because I feel like it has a lot of steps.
Oh, it does. Yeah, I started theology like a month ago. So
Exist.
I'm not trying to use when I started to justify why I'm bad. I'm just saying.
Then
Where are you sending it?
I'll send it in lounge.
All right.
Demonstrate the impossibility.
Yeah.
Of brute contingent facts.
I don't know. It's sweat, but I'm not doing the fuck. I'm glad I know. Like they hit some hurt, like some stuff like they gonna hurt, but it's gonna wear off my body. That shit gonna last about me. Why do you want to go off that floor? Shit, I've been seeing it. I'm like, okay.
Here's defining a brute fact.
All right.
There you go. So in short, your claim presupposes the falsity of the impossibility of brute contingencies. So how can you justify that brute contingencies are impossible? If you cannot, then your first premise falls apart because it's a complete contradiction to it.
If the brute contingencies exist, then everything that begins to exist having a cause is necessarily false. Demonstrate the impossibility of a brute contingent fact. Who the fuck is this? Muted. And contingency and contemporary philosophy.
Take ice, put it inside there, roll it around, and make sure she's putting it in her hand so she can put it in.
A brute fact is a fact that has no explanation. Should we say what you want me to prove again with the explanation that you wrote out?
I want you to demonstrate how the existence of a brute contingent fact is impossible. And here you go.
And a brute contingent fact is something that has a cause but doesn't need to be explained, correct?
It's basically a brute contingent fact is something that exists in some possible world that does not have an explanation in the world it exists in. So let's say there's something that exists in our world, right? And it has no explanation for its existence. That is an example of a brute contingent fact. You'd have to demonstrate these brute contingent facts are impossible, that they exist in no possible worlds. And a way to do this is to find the contradiction. And if you could point out the contradiction to me, then yes, you would be demonstrating it's impossible. But I don't know how you're gonna do this because I don't think there's a contradiction.
But yeah, so because I cannot find a contradiction and more or less have not learned / understand the art of the full art of contingency itself, I'm going to concede.
Oh,